Hello, my name is Todd Green, and I'm the Executive Director at WorkRise, a research to action network that's focused on jobs, workers, and mobility, hosted by the Urban Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our event today, which we are delighted to co-host with our grantee and partner, JPAL North America. We've moved into a new phase of post-pandemic economic recovery, one in which job growth is strong, but also one where workers are switching jobs at a higher rates than what we've seen before. Because of the disruptions caused by COVID, there's a renewed interest among workers to gain new skills, both to explore opportunities in the post-pandemic labor market, but also to protect their careers, their livelihoods, and families against future recessions and future shocks. Now is a critical moment for post-secondary workforce training programs, particularly those that are aimed at low-wage workers who are seeking pathways into jobs with higher wages and career advancement. Yet the landscape of workforce training is vast and fragmented, making it difficult for workers to navigate which program they should invest their time and resources into. As our panel will discuss today, it's not only workers who need better evidence or proof about workforce training that can unlock employment opportunities and have a long-term positive impact on earnings. Policymakers also need data to inform decisions about workforce, funding, and policies. Training providers need evidence and models to improve design and delivery of programs and services. And funders, they need better information about where to direct their investments. Now, the demand for rigorous evidence beyond anecdotal success stories is strong, which is why WorkRise chose to invest in JPAL's randomized evaluation of the Pursuit Fellowship, an intensive skills and leadership training program that prepares people from low-income backgrounds for careers in technology. We'll hear more about this research project during our discussion today. Before inviting our esteemed moderator to the Zoom, I'd like to share just a few housekeeping items. Our event today, it's being recorded, so we'll post the recording online afterward. We've muted everyone, but we encourage you to post your questions or comments in the Q&A box at any time. We have closed caption available, which you can adjust using the transcription buttons at the bottom of your screen. Please join the conversation online using the hashtag #LiveAtUrban. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Kristen Titus, Executive Director of the Cognizant Foundation. Kristen and Cognizant have been steadfast supporters of WorkRise, and we are deeply grateful for their support. You can read their full biography online, but I'll share a few of her accomplishments as a leader bridging workforce development, technology, and economic opportunity. Before joining Cognizant, Kristen was the state of New York's first Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, where she oversaw historic investments in technology, education, in workforce, and in economic development. She's also the founding executive director of Girls Who Code in New York City's tech talent pipeline. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you to our nearly 300 people on the line today. This promises to be a lively discussion and one that couldn't be more timely. I'm going to first provide introductions for the panelists who you'll learn more about their work. We'll go into more detail about in the coming hour. But I want to first introduce you to panelists and then turn to Larry Katz, who's going to give us a quick brief on the landscape and the work that JPAL is taking on that will guide our conversation today. So first, I'd like to introduce Larry Katz. Larry, if you can turn on your camera, and everyone else is going to join by camera as well. Larry is co-scientific director of JPAL North America and the Elizabeth Allison Professor of Economics at Harvard. Larry's the co-principal investigator on the WorkRise-funded randomized evaluation study of the Pursuit Fellowship, which we'll be learning about momentarily. Thank you and welcome, Larry. Next, I'll introduce Juke Xu. Juke is the CEO and co-founder of Pursuit, a social impact organization that provides intensive career preparation for adults who want to move into the technology industry. Juke, excited to hear more from you today. And finally, Maurice Jones. Maurice is the CEO of 110, a coalition of leading CEOs and companies who've committed over the next decade to upskill, hire, and promote 1 million Black Americans without four-year degrees into family-sustaining jobs. And Maurice joins us today from vacation. So Maurice, extra points for you and doubly thankful for you joining us here today. And without further ado, I want to turn to Larry, who will share more about both the landscape and what JPAL is taking on in the months ahead. With that, welcome, Larry.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. So we are very grateful to WorkRise, as well as the Russell Sage Foundation for support for the evaluation of pursuit that I'm going to talk about. But I want to start by giving a little bit of background on the situation facing many non-college workers in the US, recent trends, and where a program like Pursuit might fit in providing pathways to upward economic mobility. So any way you cut the data, there's been a large growth of inequality in the labor market in recent decades, and a very substantial and growing educational divide among those going to more selective colleges and with bachelor's degrees, and those who have not had access to such further post-secondary training. And in fact, if you look over the last 5 or 6 decades, we went from a period of shared prosperity in the 1960s to now decades of stagnation of earnings for workers without college degrees, and continued growth in earnings of those who have gone farther and had more advantages in higher education. For men, that has actually meant declining real earnings. And for women without college degrees, it's meant stagnating real earnings in recent decades. If you look at the very end of this graph, which ends just before the pandemic, you see some upturn. And the last couple of years, we've seen rapid wage growth for low-wage workers, but not into sort of longer-term careers with sustained, earnings growth of the type that might resist the next recession. And so the first fact is there's sort of a growing divide, and what used to be pathways to high-wage jobs, whether at a manufacturing firm, whether in a clerical or many sort of service sector jobs that provided a sort of living wage, seem much more precarious for many workers these days. And while we have a lot of evidence of high economic returns for getting into selective colleges or to often highly rationed programs, say nursing programs at community colleges, there's much less evidence on the pathways for individuals who may not have access to or be able to thrive because of childcare considerations, other aspects of complicated lives in traditional post-secondary education and degree programs. And a question that I think we've now seen some recent answers to is, are there pathways, training, education, employment opportunities and programs that can help individuals who may not have a college degree but have a lot of potential, basic literacy, math, and some digital skills to move into positions where people without usual post-secondary credentials may not typically be looked at as potential employees. And one possibility that we've seen a lot of evidence has been a movement over the last couple of decades, typically led by NGOs and local community development, to develop what are known as sectoral employment training programs that try to target high wage jobs for individuals who don't necessarily have to have a full 4-year BA, and where it may be possible to train for the types of skills that get you into a job that's hiring today, where employers are having trouble finding workers, but that also has a pathway to higher earnings over time. And there's growing evidence that I'll talk about that such programs can be quite successful. And in fact, the emerging evidence led to the 2014 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that tries to get state and local governments to use their federal training dollars in such a direction through apprenticeship or apprenticeship-like sectoral employment training programs. The 2021 American Rescue Plan included money to the Department of Commerce that Secretary Gina Raimondo turned into the Good Jobs Challenge, creating grants for local economic development to push in the direction of sectoral employment training programs. And most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, Google.org announced a $100 million investment program in skills training around sectoral employment models and using an income share sort of agreement to help workers fund that training of the type that the Pursuit Fellowship program we're going to talk about today. And so given this emerging evidence, we recently put together at JPAL North America a summary review of the evidence from 4 studies of 9 different sectoral employment training programs, all with randomized controlled trial evaluations to give us a lot of confidence in the evidence of their effects. And what we have found is, I led a review of all job training programs, when I worked in the Clinton administration as chief economist of the Labor Department in the 90s, and it was, very worrisome that almost no federally funded or nonprofit training programs had very consistent records of providing long-run earnings gains. But what we're now finding from sectoral employment training programs are, earnings gains persisting up to 11 years, in which we've been tracking in a recent program known as Project Quest in Texas. And what exactly are these programs, and what are the recipes of their potential success? They tend to target higher paying industries and occupations. They combine occupational skills training to get into those jobs, and training that's broader than a single employer, trying to reach out to a whole industry and sector, the type of training that employers may not provide because they're worried that workers may be poached and that workers may have a difficult time getting on their own, not knowing what are the right pathways. It's combined with sort of career readiness training, sometimes known as soft skills training. There's a little bit of upfront screening on motivation, basic math and literacy, but not, sort of the screening of getting into a selective college. And the programs have a lot of wraparound support, both for the participants and for developing jobs with employers, and with providing ongoing support once individuals have moved from training into work, and some degree of financial support during the training. So much more comprehensive, even though some of them, the training could be short-term, 4 weeks to 6 months, a year at most, but comprehensive, and then a lot of follow-up services. And so what have we seen from these evaluations? Well, we found strikingly that they succeed in getting most of the people through to get certificates and training, and they succeed in placing individuals. But unlike traditional training programs that seem to get people into jobs they would have gotten anyways a little quicker, here they get individuals into much higher wage jobs with much more persistent earnings gains. A good example is the program Year Up that actually started a couple blocks from where I'm sitting in Cambridge by Gerald Shtavian, which focuses on opportunity youth 18 to 24 years old, and works in trying to help them through a 6-month classroom training of occupational skills and 6-month internship, move into IT, finance, business type jobs. And what you can see on the graph to the right is one of the more striking and standard findings we're getting out of sectoral employment programs. While you're in the program training, you see a little bit of dip in that shaded area of earnings of the blue group, those who were randomized into treatment, versus the control group, the red. But once the training is completed and there's placement, you see a huge jump in earnings here, 50% initially that persists at 40%, a couple $1,000s a quarter. And here you see it persisting for 5 years. And in other programs, we've seen this, we've tracked for 7 to 11 years. We see similar patterns. So 35, 40% earnings gains year up. Perscolos, a similar program of tech out of operating in the Bronx, is getting 30% earnings gains, out 7 years. So much more dramatic and consistent earnings gains that persist and driven by getting people into higher wage jobs that typically minorities, women, and other people with non-traditional backgrounds have a difficult time breaking into. And we're pretty confident in this evidence because this truly was done through a randomized control trial where comparable individuals, these are programs that were oversubscribed. So a sort of fair way of deciding who gets into it is a lottery among those who are eligible and who passed all the requirements. We could actually compare those who got access to the program versus those who had business as usual. And the importance of that is that if I had a program that did nothing, that looked at a bunch of youth and young adults who were trying to, do better, I might be able to conclude that they doubled their earnings, in a couple of years, as in that red group that didn't have access to the program, because many of them enter when they're doing poorly or they're just naturally having life cycle earnings growth. But with the randomized control trial, I can actually see that it's the fact that the earnings sort of tripled in year up and that they did much better. But if I just done a before after, I would be greatly overstating, the impact of the program, and without a sort of clear research design, we wouldn't be able to know whether resources to a program were helpful or whether they were, just getting people to what they would have done without access to the program. And so where I want to conclude is this wonderful opportunity we have to work with Juke and his team in trying to learn from and push the research to look at the Pursuit Fellowship, which is, we think, a very promising program to create economic prosperity and transformation for adults with the most need from many underrepresented groups in the tech sector, that focuses on trying to get into a first tech job, advancing careers in tech, and becoming the next generation of leaders in tech, through comprehensive supportive training, real technical training from the basic of coding up to sort of full stage web app development, plus a lot of support of getting industry readiness, what we call career soft skills training, and leadership and personal development, and a tremendous amount of follow-up once you've moved out of the training program into a career. Substantial work at providing connections to companies with tech jobs and job search support, and no need to pay for the training unless you actually really succeed in getting a high wage job. So no payment until your earnings, and only paying back over a brief period, not things like student loans that sort of go on forever, is the sort of income share agreement. And Pursuit has been successful at recruiting a very diverse group of individuals who are underrepresented in the tech sector, all from low-income groups, substantially Black or Latinx, women and non-binary, many recent immigrants, and largely individuals without college degrees. And there's a lot of, we think this is promising because the observational evidence suggests that graduates of the Pursuit program get very high wage jobs. So relative to the other sort of sectoral employment training programs, it's really been one that has done an excellent job of pushing people to very high wage jobs. And so a key question is, can we go beyond where other programs have gone and see if you can get people into really high wage employment? And are these sort of observational findings of Pursuit, how much of them are sort of real? And the randomized evaluation will allow us to push in this direction and hopefully make big research progress. I know I've gone over time, so let me unshare my stream and move to the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry, for that really remarkable brief on where we've been in the workforce landscape, how it's evolved so dramatically over the last 20 years. And I, for one, am shocked to see that we're 8 years into WIOA. It feels like it was just yesterday. If I can welcome our panelists back to the stage here. I'd love to start where you ended off, Larry, and that is with JUK. You are our workforce training provider here, our sectoral training provider, having done this for nearly a decade. Tell us a little bit more about the pursuit model. What problem were you trying to solve when you created the program? And what have you learned in the decade since that has gone into the remarkable outcomes that Larry just shared?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you so much, Larry. It's such a privilege to be here and partner with Larry and the JPAL team, and then with WorkRise to really try to find deeper understanding of our work and how it applies to really changing the sector so we can help more kind of Americans. Larry gave a great overview of Pursuit, and so what we're really trying to solve for is this kind of economic opportunity problem, and what I'm motivated by is understanding, what impact does this have for blue collar workers from underserved communities. I've been so fortunate in my life as a poor immigrant kid from Queens growing up. I've had tremendous kind of educational kind of experiences. Always interested in these kind of issues around economic systems and what enables kind of communities kind of move forward. I was raised by my mom. My mom went to school when she was 40 years old, went back to school when she was 40 years old, and eventually became a social worker when she was 46. So this idea of, what does it mean to have a middle-class job and impact on families and communities is just deeply resonant to me, and I've benefited so much from that. So how we can create those opportunities for more people, I think particularly in the landscape where technology's created more wealth, companies and jobs than ever before, but many people are excluded from the access to that and the ability to kind of participate in that. And I've really kind of seen that in my own life, both studying originally as an undergrad at Harvard, originally wanted to be an economist, admire of Larry and everything he's done. And so it's kind of crazy to be able to work on this study now. And, that was such a different kind of experience for me where, some of my classmates come from very kind of different backgrounds. There's a moment in time also where many of my classmates went on and created technology companies, right? Facebook was created in my class as an undergraduate. And, that was like such a astounding experience. Like, what does it mean? People are, wait, what? Raising millions of dollars of venture capital? What are you talking about? What is this? All these things. And the only reason I think I've seen that being possible is because of a moment in time and where I was and kind of the community and network that kind of demonstrated it was possible and kind of opened up that kind of viewpoint for me. And then after college, I decided to join the military. So I was in the Army for 4 years. And I think that was an interesting kind of informative experience as well. I went in as an infantry officer, so did patrols and raids, spent a year in Iraq. But it's kind of an odd experience still. As an officer, and my first job at 22 is leading a rifle platoon of 40 men. It was all mine at the time. But most of them had more experience than me. My platoon sergeant was in the Army for 15 years, super nerdy kid, not particularly athletic. I didn't know how to shoot. So actually it wasn't like a skills-based experience while I was leading this platoon. And the only difference is that I went to college. Like that's the only difference between a college degree and a soldier, like an officer and a soldier. So, I've always believed that it's about kind of what opportunities people are afforded and what that kind of means. And I think also the military really seeing that, amazing soldiers, wide range of soldiers, but some of the hardest working smart people I've ever met, never went to college. So in thinking about after the military around these kind of contacts, like what does it mean for so many more Americans as our economy continues to kind of change and more companies are created and that's shaping our future for more people to have access to that. And so that is really what is at the root of Pursuit and why, I helped start it and working with so many others on that. And just a quick point on what we kind of learned over the years, I think as much of what kind of Larry was speaking about, and I'm sure Maurice will speak about as well, it's a labor market issue, right? So thinking about Pursuit, how to solve, if we're thinking about non-college grads, college grads and those with other kind of barriers, training is a fundamental component, us in community development, engaging people awareness for this kind of intensive training so people can be successful. But that's a necessary but not sufficient condition for a job and also long-term employment outcomes. Our focus on the long term, that people not only get a job, but this becomes a permanent change in your life trajectory and career. So as important is the demand side of the equation, working with employers to break down structural barriers and enable success on the job for both the employer and our participants. And then the third side of the equation is just how this is financed, right? What's the model on this? So for us, thinking about Pursue, we have our fellowship training, incredibly important, kind of supply side, thinking about a marketplace, supply side. We have our employer programs on the demand side. And then the third side is how can we have evidence-based outcomes-based financing to kind of enable all this to work? And ultimately, these are not different things, but are fundamental to, I think, our strategy. And I think that's the hardest, that's what's tough about workforce development, is because it's this broader labor market issue. And I think to think of it as isolated training does a disservice, and that creates part of the challenge of why it's very hard to have consistent results.
That's great, GK. And I think you touched on some of Maurice's work as well. Maurice, let me turn to you. Really, the launch of 110 was a milestone in our field and marked really an important rallying cry for all companies, as GK mentioned, to really mobilize around this mission and vision. Tell us a little bit more about your vision for 110, what you're trying to achieve, and then the role that sectoral training programs like Pursuit are playing in achieving that larger vision.
Yep, well, it's nice to be with you all. Nice to see you again, GK and Larry. Good to be with you as well. Look, 110 has as its mission the hiring and the promotion of 1 million Black talent who don't yet have 4-year degrees into family-sustaining careers and jobs over the next 10 years. We are a coalition now of north of 65 companies. Those companies have really come together and they are doing a handful of things. One, they're putting jobs on the table that don't require a 4-year degree for Black talent without 4-year degree to compete for. Those jobs have to have 4 characteristics. They have to pay a living wage, and we use the MIT living wage calculator to determine what that is. So that'll differ by MSA. 2, they cannot require a 4-year degree as a gateway for competition. 3, they can't require more than 5 years experience as a gateway. And then 4, they can't be at risk of getting automated out of existence in 6 months, right? Any jobs that have those 4 characteristics work for purposes of the 110 journey. And what I want to pause and say on this is there are jobs with those characteristics everywhere. We have sales jobs, HR jobs, IT jobs, manufacturing jobs, finance jobs, healthcare jobs, coding jobs. I want to make sure people understand that there are multiple jobs across multiple industries, across multiple employers that can work for this purpose. The second piece of what the employers agree to do is actually, and this is the hardest part, re-credential existing jobs. In other words, look at jobs and rebuild them from a skills-first perspective. Remove the 4-year degree credential where it's not related to the actual skills necessary to do the work. That's the toughest part of the work, because as an employer, you really have to step back and get out of your comfort zone of using the proxy, and that's all it is, the proxy of a 4-year credential, to say things, by the way, that it really doesn't say. and really do the hard work of discerning and articulating the skills you're looking for on day one and the skills that employees have to build over time. And I apologize, I'm in a hotel, so you may hear some noise in the background. The third piece of this is a community of practice. So all of the employers have agreed to come together in the form of a forum that we curate 3 times a year. We curate a forum for the CEOs, we curate a forum for the CHROs, and we're sharing best practices in those areas where you have to be great. Skills first hiring, how to create a career pathway for folks as opposed to just focusing on hiring, how to use apprenticeships to hire and to promote, what it looks like to really create a sense of belonging for Black talent. Those are the kinds of things that we come together, dive deep in, and share best practices in. The fourth piece that we ask of the companies is, let's do this for a decade. If we're going to transform companies, and this is all about change, we're going to change companies, change the trajectory of Black talent and their families, and hopefully change the country. You can't do that in 10 months. So let's stay together for 10 years. And then our business model, our financial model, the companies, in addition to putting jobs on the table, they actually invest capital with our nonprofit that is 110. So we have the resources to do the work. And the work really is about building an ecosystem. Larry hit on this in his presentation. The ecosystem for us is starting with demand, so companies with jobs. Secondly, then we need organizations that can equip the talent to be successful in those jobs. So the year ups and the per scholas, we have 100 organizations right now that are in the talent development business that we go to equip talent for the jobs that companies are putting on the table. The third piece is the wraparound support. So in addition to the technical skills, and I call what some people say, they call them soft skills. I call them durable skills, because I think soft is really not an accurate description of what they are. Grit and perseverance and determination. Let me just say it in the vernacular. They ain't soft, right? It is the essence of what you need for success. But in addition to those, you need wraparound supports, coaches, mentors, transportation, the kinds of stuff you need around mental wellness, mental health. We bring that to the table as well. Then obviously the fourth piece of the ecosystem is the talent. We source the talent through their relationships, often with the talent developers, because the talent developers are already teaching them, already training them, already licensing them, already providing certifications. But we also are developing other partnerships around the country, partnerships with the NAACP and faith-based organizations, and frankly, going directly to talent. This is about building an ecosystem, building and scaling an ecosystem. Where Pursuit and others really come in is you have to have organizations that can source and equip talent for the opportunities. Or as I say to people, jobs are just not enough, right? We've got to get people ready for those jobs, and we got to sustain that readiness. And so you have to have a pursuit in the ecosystem in order for us to be successful. So that's why I'm so excited about what UK is doing. I'm excited about what the year ups and the Perscolas and others are doing. By the way, among the biggest opportunities are frankly our community colleges. They have right now, and from our standpoint, more Black talent who are pre-baccalaureate already in training than any other single place in the ecosystem. And so we're bringing them to the table as well. The headline is, this is a team sport. Let me finish with this. If you look at jobs that pay $60,000 and above across our country today, on paper, 79% of them require a 4-year degree. You look at jobs that pay $40,000 and above today across our country, on paper, 71% of them require a 4-year degree. If you look at Black talent, 25 years and above in the workforce today, 76% of us do not yet have a 4-year degree. That number is 83% when it comes to Latinx. And oh, by the way, it's 66% when it comes to the workforce across the board. The bottom line is we have a credential in our country that is literally a systemic barrier to most of us earning our way into the middle class. We got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of that. We got to move to a skills first approach. We got to understand that there are multiple ways to come about those skills. The 4-year credential is one way. It should not be the only way. I'll stop at that.
That's great, Maurice. You gave us many headlines, not just one there, but I'll call out two. One, it is a team sport, and what you and 110 have done to mobilize employers around removing those barriers and driving employer practice change. The second headline you noted was, this is about change. This is about meaningful change where all of those parties are required at the table to really realize this vision. So thank you for that, Maurice, and all the work you're doing with employers. I want to turn to Larry, you and the work that you're doing to inform policymakers and practitioners. Talk to us a little bit about the evidence that you've developed and will continue to develop with projects like this J-PAL Pursuit Partnership. Who needs that evidence? How do we get it in the right hands? And what outcomes can it yield?
Well, we've been working, at J-PAL, as well as, our network of academics and a lot of other, important organizations like MDRC, Mathematica, APT, and others for a number of years at trying to both, when possible, run randomized control trials to have really gold standard based evidence, and increasingly to use, access to administrative data and, as close as possible to a natural experiment, which was what this year's Nobel Prize in Economics was actually about, as ways of trying to learn what types of programs and what mixture and what ecosystem are more effective for helping non-college workers break these barriers and move. And as I said, we had many years of disappointing findings because the programs were sort of one-off and they didn't have all these elements. They would just do training, or they would just do the career development part, and help you search for a job, but didn't actually give you the skills you needed to get in the door. Or, they would stop before the placement. And even if the person had the skills and the connection, one small infraction at a job could disrupt that. And so what we have learned, and I think what organizations, community colleges, as well as state and local training operations need to know, is it's developing the ecosystem and putting together all the components, the wraparound services with the training, with the connections to employers, that all of them are important, but when they're combined, that's what really works. And trying to do this on the cheap and just sort of doing what a local low-wage employer on your private industry council wants, will get some people into jobs a little quicker than they would have done otherwise, but doesn't have the lasting sort of change of breaking down barriers and giving people sustaining careers. And that's really the lessons we're finding. And what we see, when you look at a program like Year Up, like Perscolas, and we believe hopefully, we'll find for sort of Pursuit, the actual gains to taxpayers from increased earnings and the greater tax payments and lower support payments more than outweigh in those evaluations the cost of doing the more comprehensive program, which is in the several thousands of dollars more, whereas we're talking about people who are then earning, in Year Up, $2,000 a quarter. In a few quarters, you've paid that back.
And as the funder on the line here, I can say that evidence and that narrative is so important as we have really as a field shifted our definitions of success with this evidence in hand, with the RCT feedback in hand. I think, Juke, tell us a little bit more about what JPAL's work and the RCT will enable for you. And I think, what more needs to be done with this data in hand to move away from the what we used to call, Larry, what you mentioned, the train and pray model, right? What are you hoping comes out of this, and what story are you hoping to tell with this data in hand?
Yeah, I think outcomes are fundamental. We're all here, and it is the ecosystem approach. I think we all care about creating great outcomes for people, for employers, for families and communities. And so without evidence and outcomes, that there's no point in doing the work daily. And I think we should be really rooted in that. Pursue, I think that's been, we've really tried to have that approach, and as I think Larry said, unfortunately, like workforce development programs are very inconsistent. Frankly, most of them haven't worked and don't have long-term outcomes. And I think that's very disappointing, and that's a failure. And I think we should, we have to change that, and let's be honest about that. So, I think in shaping Pursuit, I think we want to be really, really kind of radically candid about that and what that means. And so we're really structuring everything in the organization around that, whether what we do with employers, everything's incentive line over 3 years post, so that there's a career wages and earnings. To our financial model, we have great philanthropic supporters, but I think our ISA/bond financing model is not just a way to make it self-sustaining, but also having multiple years of evidence on wages. And the only way, and the organization is incentivized to have to make that work. So, we had evidence of that. We had our first kind of income share / impact financing in 2016. And really through that, from 2016 to 2020, was able to demonstrate and outperform against what we said we're going to do and repay back our kind of financial model and kind of investors. However, why it's so exciting to work with JPAL is really having a deeper understanding of long-term impacts. What does that mean? From what we know now, there is getting people from $18,000 to $85,000 a year. And that's dramatic, very tangible. It's about $1 million in lifetime earnings for the individuals that go through our program are successful. However, that we want to understand the counterfactual. We want to understand how this influences policy, and not just make our work better at Pursuit, but hopefully we can work with others to either take parts of our model or adopt others so that we can support the development and growth of the field overall. I don't think any of this is competitive. It's all positive sum, and we should work together to figure out how we can create this greater change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, Maurice, if I can turn to you on the employer side, what I think there's just great possibility here is with this research and evidence, really getting buy-in and support from the employer community around accelerated training programs, alternative education programs that create pathways for those from systemically excluded, those who have been systemically excluded, as you noted. What do you think this data and this narrative and this evidence will do for employers? And what do you think employers are looking to see and validate?
Look, I think employers today need great talent, period, right? And what they really need with respect to talent that don't yet have 4-year degrees is a mindset shift. I'll just put it to you bluntly, right? This is really about changing mindsets. You change mindsets by showing results. Change mindsets by providing channels to great talent that are equipped to do the job, that have the skills and the ability to learn the skills, irrespective of a credential. Last year, the companies that made up the 110 Coalition hired over 20,000 folks, Black talent without 4-year degrees, and promoted 4,000 to 5,000 Black without 4-year degrees. It was a matter of, or it remains a matter of, being able to help these companies source that talent, being able to partner with these companies to help them equip that talent, being able to partner with them to continue to upskill and reskill. Those are the kinds of things that are changing mindsets as we speak. Now, it doesn't hurt that there are 10 million open jobs right now. So the timing of this also is working in our favor. But the bottom line is there is nothing more compelling than for them to hire someone based on skills and see that person continue to get advanced in the company and do great work and contribute to a great entity. And that's happening and can happen more. But make no mistake about it, the fundamental change here is a mindset shift. That's really, and that mindset shift has to happen at the CEO, CHRO, the hiring manager, the people manager. That is a cultural breakthrough. I see it happening. I think the times have never been more ripe for it to happen, and we have to aggressively lean into the opportunity.
I'm going to take that positive note, Maurice, and turn to Larry and the group here. You touched on this a little bit. What does the labor market look like today? We've seen dramatic changes in the last 2 years. Of course, impacts of COVID accelerating nearly every point that you discussed, Larry. How has it changed? And maybe from each of you, one positive takeaway for us. What is the opportunity at hand? What should we be looking for here? And maybe Larry, from you, what evidence can we capture in this moment to accelerate this real opportunity, as you said, Maurice?
Yeah, well, as Maurice noted, many employers are, desperately looking for workers. So that creates an openness and a willingness, and, are reducing where they had. We know when the ratio of vacancies is high relative to job seekers, they actually relax the things like college, requirements, and are willing to take a look at people they wouldn't. So that does create an opportunity, but there's also some risk. The risk is there are a lot of jobs open, some that are going to pay it pretty well in the short run, but don't have any upward trajectory for workers. And workers passing up the opportunities to go with a program like Pursuit or a Pearson Year Up, where they really would then get into a job with a greater career trajectory to take short run. Many people are desperate for income, and some low wage jobs are paying high wages. So there's an interesting trade-off there that we, need to sort of be able to provide stipends and help for people to do the programs that are going to be better for the long run. But a worry is that the huge number of job openings means we're going to divert people from what might be in their longer term best interest. And the other key question we face is, are there ways to sort of create pathways to people who couldn't quite get into a Pursuit or a Year Up Now? They might not quite have the math skills, literacy. Are there, ways to, create pathways or to lower the screening there a little bit to get a broader group in, maybe have a longer version? Those are a couple of the open questions we're facing.
That's great. Bridge programs still sorely needed. Can I turn to GK Maurice for a quick positive before we open up for Q&A? We've got a lot of great questions to tackle too.
Yeah. I think huge opportunities here, and again, I think it's both an employer but also training. I think also, I guess one thing I want to know, I think the expansive in the opportunity, there's a lot of focus on opportunity youth or young adults, 16, 24 years old, like for example, Perscolas and Year Up, which we're talking about. Most workforce training programs are focused on youth. However, I think the larger opportunity, if we care about families and reskilling and upskilling, it's not those that are limited to 24 or below, but those in their 30s and 40s. And really, so I'm hoping with this change in the labor market as well, and that's what Pursuit is focused on, adults, right? Like not limit to just youth. How can we think about these opportunities more broadly so that people can have multiple careers and multiple trajectories? It's not just at the start, because we all go on different paths and journeys, and I hope we can really think about it more comprehensively from an age kind of perspective as well, and or else we're going to leave out a lot of Americans who may have huge opportunities for their continued growth and kind of development in their careers.
Great point, UK. Maurice, positive to leave us.
Yeah, the skills first hiring, skills first promotion is a trend and a movement in the private sector right now. I mean, I can't think of a better time to be Pursuit or Perscolas or Year Up. We need to scale this. And so I'm a naive optimist, but I think we're in the midst of something that's got at least a decade's run, and we need to maximize the opportunities here, particularly for talent of color and talent in low resource communities and talent in rural communities, because the virtual part of this is also going to be a key ingredient. So it's all big time opportunity as far as what I can see.
That's great. And Maurice, it's as if you were reading from the Q&A, because the question of scale is the first question I want to quickly tackle. And that is, we have an audience member asking, given the high touch nature of these sectoral training programs, time intensive, costly, et cetera, we've talked about this, what's the most effective way to scale these programs? And you touched on one part of that, I think already, Maurice, a dramatic shift we've seen in the field with many of these programs going online in the last 2 years and really proving effective in a new model. But maybe Juke, I'll go to you on that one. How do you think about scale and, at high cost, high touch, what does that look like?
I probably have an unpopular opinion around this. I think everyone's obsessed with scale, and like we want to help as many Americans and that's important. But I'm obsessed with like depth of impact and long-term outcomes. And I think it's unrealistic. I believe ultimately that anyone can be successful if given the opportunities and resources to kind of achieve, right? Or to enable that and over time. And so it's really what's the audience and what's expected. And so I think, I think the scale of numbers, we should think about that, but also what's a depth of impact. And I think that's why this evidence-based approach with JPAL is so important to kind of enable that. But it's a hard question. I think the training has to be effective. You have to have effective financing to scale. There's limited philanthropy for adult training. As something you know, very, very limited philanthropy, especially for adults. I'm emphasizing adults because everyone cares about the kids and the youth, and it's really important. But what happens to adults in this country? And that's what you impact families. And then also the employer. So I think we all work at different parts of the equation. And first things have to be effective, and then we can figure out what to scale. But it's a tough labor market kind of condition. But I know that's probably unpopular. But it is let's figure out what's working, depth of impact, and having the best jobs, and then we can grow and enable. Well, I guess the way is also enable the organizations with that evidence of what works, so that many organizations grow and flourish versus this obsession with scale that kind of that might be detrimental to the actual outcome or what's actually happening.
And Juke, you touched on one barrier to scale that everyone feels acutely, and that is funding. What and how do you build sustainable funding models for these types of programs? And clearly Pursuit has employed an ISA-like model to do this. For our panelists, can we talk a little bit about, ISA, income sharing agreements versus apprenticeship programs versus, funding community colleges and or sectoral intermediaries? What have we seen as the most effective, sustainable models by which to fund and scale these programs?
So let me jump in here, because we're at risk of trying to say there's only one model that is best. That's not the case. The bottom line is we have 100 sectoral trainers that we work with. Some of them are intensive year ups. Some of them are 8-week boot camps all online. The bottom line is, if we're going to reach talent, there are 11 million underemployed Black people, and I apologize, people are walking. If we're going to meet all of these talent, we need multiple options, and we need multiple options that work. The moment we start talking about one model that works is the moment we find ourselves not enough access to these programs. So look, community colleges have a model that work. Pursuit has a model. Europe has a model. All I can tell you is I've seen multiple models work, right? And it is my view that we definitely need 1,000 flowers to bloom in this space to reach the talent and to maximize the opportunity that we have here. And it is my hope that we won't be trying to hone in on one model and just say that's the one model that works. That's actually what's happening now, right? The 4-year credential being the only pathway. We need multiple pathways amongst our trainers. We need multiple pathways amongst job occupations. We need online boot camps. We need in-person intensive programs. We need an array to meet talent where they are. And I've seen them work across all of these opportunities.
That's great. 100 flowers blooming in the 110 network. And to your point, Juke, there isn't a one size fits all for opportunity youth and older adults. It's truly, it requires a diversity of options. I want to close with a question for you, Larry, from the audience here. And this is a really important and timely question, and something that we hope your research digs into. The question is, how do these program evaluations adequately report outcomes disaggregated by race and ethnicity? The question says, it's one thing to infer positive outcomes just because the pool of participants is diverse, but how are we evaluating outcomes by race and ethnicity?
So, in the 9 evaluations I talked about, each individual one, the sample size is such that it's tough to separately estimate things by race and by ethnicity. But what I can say is the central estimates of large impacts, say of a program like Perskalas, Project Quest, or Europe, all these samples are 70 to 90%, Black and Hispanic. When you pull them all together, you get very large impacts for both Black and Latinx individuals, for both men and for women. It's tough to squeeze out exactly, which individual program might be slightly better for more than the others. And the other important thing, I think, building on what Juke said, is while Europe is entirely for opportunity youth 18 to 24, Perskalas, actually the typical person in their late 20s, early 30s, and Project Quest is actually people in their 40s typically. So we have very similar success, not just with opportunity youth, but actually with adults who, in case of Project Quest, almost all of them were simultaneously working and doing the education, whereas in Perskalas it was full-time sort of training as in Pursuit. So there isn't just one model. They have all these same elements, but how you deliver it depends on your population. There are individuals where the online is going to work. There are individuals where the intensive in-person is. And I think, they're clear elements, but they need to be mixed and matched for the appropriate group. And while I can't tell you this single program is better for one group or the other, we know this sort of model is working for all of these different groups pretty well, and that customizing it to the needs of the individual employers and workers seems to be our best bet going forward.
Fantastic way to leave us here. We're at time, a best bet moving forward. Thank you to Urban and the WorkRise team, Larry, Maurice, Juke. Thank you for your time and invaluable insights. And we look forward to this research. I'm sure all of us here will be digging in. Before we part ways, there'll be a follow-up survey. We'd love your thoughts and feedback, and bios and contact information in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Be well and talk soon.
Thank you.